Right, let's get one thing perfectly straight. When you think of the car, the actual car, not some horse-drawn contraption with a lawnmower engine bolted on, you're thinking of Mercedes-Benz. They didn't just join the party, they threw the party, sent out the invitations, and probably invented the hangover cure afterwards. For over a century, that three-pointed star hasn't just been a badge. It's been a declaration of intent, a promise of engineering so meticulous it makes a Swiss watchmaker look like a clumsy oaf. They are, quite simply, the bedrock upon which everything else with four wheels and an engine has been built. Now, some manufacturers, they have a good decade, maybe two. They produce a car that's vaguely memorable, and then they fade back into making washing machines or worse, beige. But not Mercedes. Oh no. They've been at the bleeding edge since Carl Benz first coughed his patent motor wagon into life, terrifying horses and delighting the one person who could afford it. They've consistently, annoyingly, brilliantly pushed the boundaries of what a car can be, what it should do, and how it makes you feel. It's a legacy not just of luxury but of relentless, Teutonic and sometimes frankly bonkers innovation. So what we're going to do today, in this typically understated and brief manner of mine, is embark on a bit of a romp through time. We'll start with that first spluttering, revolutionary machine, the genesis of personal transport. Then, we'll blast through decades of their greatest hits, their most daring experiments, and how they've navigated wars, recessions, and the invention of the speed camera, all the way to their frankly sci-fi visions of what we might be wafting around in tomorrow. Prepare for a journey from the birth of the automobile to concepts so futuristic they probably run on unicorn tears. Buckle up, or don't, your choice, but you'll miss out. Let's be honest. Carl Benz's patent motor wagon of 1886 wasn't exactly a Bugatti Chiron off the line. It had three wheels, the sort of horsepower you'd now find in a decent hairdryer, and probably sounded like a blacksmith having an argument with a tin bucket. But, and this is the crucial bit, it worked. It was the moment humanity decided that horses were, frankly, a bit smelly and inconvenient. This wasn't just a new machine, it was a new epoch. Imagine the sheer audacity, to think I shall build a carriage that propels itself, while everyone else was probably worried about the quality of their hay. This, then, was the spark, the primordial soup from which all automotive life crawled. Gottlieb Daimler, working nearby, was also fiddling with internal combustion engines, strapping them to anything that didn't run away fast enough. Boats, stagecoaches, you name it. It was a period of frantic, brilliant, probably quite dangerous experimentation. These weren't sensible men in lab coats. These were pioneers with oil under their fingernails and a glint of magnificent obsession in their eyes. They weren't thinking about emission standards or crash test ratings. They were thinking, can I make this infernal contraption move under its own steam without exploding? And by and large, they succeeded, laying the absolute groundwork for every single journey you've ever made that didn't involve your own 2 feet. The early Mercedes cars that followed, after the eventual sensible merging of these pioneering efforts, began to shape what a car actually was. They started to look less like runaway prams and more like something you might actually want to be seen in. They were still rudimentary by our pampered standards, of course. You probably needed an engineering degree just to start one, and a journey of 50 miles was an expedition worthy of a medal. But the DNA was there, the commitment to engineering, the pursuit of performance, and the undeniable presence that said, I am the future. And they weren't wrong, were they? Annoyingly. Now, you might think that a couple of world wars and a global economic implosion might put a bit of a damper on building fancy motorcars. And for many, it did. Companies vanished, dreams crumbled, and the world had, shall we say, other priorities. But Mercedes-Benz, in their typically stubborn German way, seemed to view these colossal global calamities as mere inconveniences, irritating interruptions to the serious business of engineering excellence. While the world was busy redesigning borders and arguing in trenches, Mercedes was redesigning engines and chassis. It's almost infuriatingly impressive. Think about the 1920s and 30s. The roaring 20s gave way to the oh dear, we're all skint 30s. Yet this is the era where Mercedes, having formerly become Mercedes-Benz in 1926, started producing some of the most opulent, powerful, and frankly terrifyingly fast cars the world had ever seen. The SSK, for instance. A supercharged monster that looked like it could swallow lesser cars whole, and probably did. These weren't just cars, they were statements of defiance, technological marvels that roared in the face of adversity. They were complex, expensive, and utterly magnificent, a testament to innovation when just keeping the lights on was a challenge for most. Then came the Second World War, a period best described as suboptimal for car production, unless you were making military vehicles, which, of course, they did. But even as the factories were repurposed and the world burned, the engineering know-how, the sheer bloody-mindedness to build things properly, didn't just evaporate. So, when the dust settled and Europe began to painfully rebuild itself, Mercedes-Benz was there, ready to pick up where they left off, perhaps a little battered, undoubtedly changed, but with that core of engineering integrity very much intact, ready to once again show the world how a proper motorcar is made, even if the roads were full of potholes and petrol was rationed. Right, the world stopped trying to blow itself up quite so much, and people have a bit of spare cash. What does Mercedes do? They unleash the 300 SL Gullwing. Now, some cars are pretty, some are fast. The Gullwing was automotive theater. Those doors. Utterly impractical, of course. Try getting out of one in a tight parking space with an ounce of dignity. Impossible. But who cared? It was stunning. Advanced. First production car with fuel injection, thank you very much, and instantly became the poster car for a generation. It wasn't just a car. It was a signal that Mercedes was back, and they were aiming for the stars. Or at least, very expensive garages. Alongside these headline-grabbing supercars, Mercedes was also busy making cars for, well, actual people. The Ponton models of the 1950s might look a bit staid now, like your grandpa's favorite saloon, but they were revolutionary in their own quiet, German way. They introduced crumple zones, for heaven's sake. While American cars were all fins and chrome, obsessed with looking like rockets, Mercedes was already thinking about what happens when things go a bit pear-shaped. Safety. A terribly boring concept, but one that Mercedes embraced with the grim determination of a dentist advising you to floss more. And they were right, of course, they usually are. This era also saw Mercedes go truly global. That three-pointed star started appearing in places it had never been seen before. They weren't just building cars, they were building a reputation, an unshakable belief that if you bought a Mercedes, you were buying the best. From the dusty tracks of Africa to the autobahns of Germany, these cars became symbols of durability, reliability, and a certain kind of understated, "I've made it" success. They were the default choice for sensible dictators and discerning bank managers alike. They built tanks that were comfortable, and comfortable cars that were built like tanks. A clever trick, that. Ah, the 1980s. Big hair, even bigger shoulder pads, and well, the dawn of the microchip invading everything, including our beloved motorcars. Mercedes, never one to be left behind in a technological arms race, dived in headfirst. Suddenly, cars weren't just about engines and suspension. They were about ABS, airbags, traction control, and honestly, more buttons on the dashboard than a space shuttle. The S-Class from this period, the W126 and then the W140, weren't just cars. They were mobile statements of technological supremacy, veritable fortresses of luxury and complexity. The W140 S-Class, in particular, was a behemoth, over-engineered to a degree that was almost comical. Double-glazed windows, self-closing doors and boot, antennas that majestically rose from the rear wings when you selected reverse so you wouldn't scuff its enormous backside. It was as if the engineers in Stuttgart had been given a blank check and told to go absolutely mad. And they did. The result was a car that felt like it could survive a direct missile hit and still get you to your board meeting on time, with the air conditioning keeping you perfectly chilled. It was the automotive equivalent of a very, very expensive bank vault, but with much comfier seats. This obsession with technology wasn't just for show though. Much of it genuinely made cars safer, more comfortable, and whisper it, easier to drive. While some of us might grumble about the increasing disconnect between driver and machine, there's no denying that Mercedes was pioneering systems that would eventually trickle down to more mundane vehicles. They were setting the benchmark for what a luxury car should be, packed with so much innovation that rivals were left scratching their heads, wondering how on earth they were going to catch up. They were, in essence, inventing modern luxury, one microchip and one overly complicated switch at a time. The new millennium. And with it, Mercedes decided cars weren't just clever, they needed to be intelligent. We started hearing about things like distronic cruise control that braked for you, the beginning of the end for driver engagement, some might say. Or well, the dawn of blissful stress-free commuting, others might argue. Parking sensors that beeped with increasing panic, navigation systems that sometimes took you on scenic routes through industrial estates, and cars that could, allegedly, see in the dark better than you could. It was all very futuristic, and occasionally very annoying. Then came the big one, the electric shift. Now, I've made my feelings about electric cars known. They're quiet. Too quiet. Like a milk float with ambitions. But credit where it's due, Mercedes didn't just dip a toe in the water. They launched a whole sub-brand, EQ, and started churning out electric vehicles that looked, felt, and drove like proper Mercedes-Benz cars, albeit ones that made a faint humming noise instead of a satisfying V8 bellow. The EQS, for example, with its hyperscreen dashboard that's bigger than most people's televisions, is undeniably a technological tour de force. It's a statement that if the future is electric, then Mercedes intends to be at the very, very expensive front of it. This period has been about transformation, a fundamental rethinking of what a car is and what it does. From increasingly sophisticated driver assistance systems that verge on autonomous driving, cars that can change lanes by themselves, park themselves, and probably make you a passable cup of coffee if you ask nicely, to the seismic shift towards battery power. Mercedes has been navigating this complex, rapidly changing landscape with a familiar blend of ambition and meticulous engineering. Whether you like the direction or not, you can't deny they're attacking it with a seriousness that suggests they plan on being around for another 100 years, even if their cars start sounding like well-behaved kitchen appliances. Just when you thought Mercedes might be settling into a predictable groove of making very luxurious, very clever, and, honestly, increasingly silent electric cars, they wheel out something like the Biome concept. Now this isn't just a car, it's a biological experiment on wheels, or at least that's the utterly bonkers premise. A vehicle grown from genetically modified seeds? A car that weighs less than 1,000 pounds because its body is made from something called biofiber, which is apparently lighter than metal or plastic but stronger than steel. It sounds like something a particularly imaginative child would dream up after eating too much cheese. According to the boffins at Mercedes, this car would be grown in a nursery, not built in a factory. Its power source? BioNectar 4534, whatever that is. Probably sunshine and good intentions. It would seamlessly integrate with the ecosystem, releasing pure oxygen as it wafts along. It's so absurdly, wonderfully ambitious that you can't help but admire the sheer audacity of it. Is it practical? Almost certainly not. Will we be popping down to the Mercedes dealership to plant our next car anytime soon? Highly unlikely. But that's not the point of concepts like the Biome. The point is to stretch the imagination, to poke at the boundaries of what's considered possible, and to show that even a company as established and, let's face it, sometimes a bit serious as Mercedes-Benz, can still dream in wildly improbable ways. It's a signal that they're not just thinking about the next model year or the next decade. They're thinking about a future so distant and different that it makes current electric cars look like horse-drawn carts. It's a reminder that the same spirit of what if that drove Carl Benz to build that first sputtering motorcar is still alive and well in Stuttgart, even if it now involves talking to botanists as much as engineers. Utterly mad and rather brilliant. So, there you have it. A ridiculously quick sprint through more than a century of Mercedes-Benz. From a three-wheeled contraption that probably frightened the chickens, to a car you supposedly grow from a seed. If there's one thread that ties all this together, apart from the consistently eye-watering price tags on some of their models, it's an unyielding, almost religious devotion to pushing things forward. They invented the car as we know it, and they've been relentlessly reinventing it ever since, often dragging the rest of the industry along with them, sometimes kicking and screaming. Their commitment to innovation isn't just a marketing slogan, it's embedded in their DNA, like a particularly stubborn gene that refuses to settle for good enough. Whether it's safety, luxury, performance, or now, sustainability and mind-bending futuristic concepts, Mercedes-Benz has consistently aimed to be not just a player, but the benchmark. They've shaped the past of mobility, they're undeniably shaping its present, and you'd have to be a fool to bet against them shaping its future, however weird and wonderful that future might be. They just keep on going, don't they? Now, I've undoubtedly missed out your favorite Mercedes milestone. Or perhaps you think one of their innovations was a load of old codswallop. Well, don't just sit there nodding sagely. Get down into the comments section and tell us, what's the one Mercedes moment, the one car, the one piece of tech that stands out for you? Was it the Gullwing? The indestructible W123? Or are you, heaven forbid, excited about cars grown in a lab? Let the debate commence. And try to keep it civilized. Or don't. It's more fun that way.